Welcome everyone to MMA Untold, where it is our mission to bring you the stories behind the lives and careers of fighters, key rivalries, and historic events that make mixed martial arts the greatest sport on earth. My name is Taylor Gabriels. Alongside me, as always, is a man whose Twitter privileges have been reinstated due to good behavior. The scrappy one himself, Zach Gratton.
What, not being on Twitter at all?
Yeah, you've been behaving. You haven't been going off
like
on fans.
6 months. Yeah, that was a long time then.
You've been very well behaved, sir, and you are allowed to be on Twitter again.
That works.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And next to him, the one they call the Godfather, Tim Thomas.
Good morning.
Yeah, it is morning, by
It's
the way.
early.
This is the first time we've done a morning podcast.
Yep, it is morning where we are. I have my hot tea. Zach's got his vanilla Coke.
That's gone.
And Tim's
It's
got
also-
a rum and Coke.
I wish it was a rum and Coke.
So we're all set today. Big episode today, boys.
Big episode. Really excited, actually, about this one. Been kind of waiting for it for a while, and we finally get to it.
It's gonna be complicated. This is a deep dive. There's a lot of stuff people don't know. We're doing Daniel Cormier, and it's a pretty dramatic story, and there's a lot of layers to it. So here we go.
And Cormier is a guy who gets a lot of boos from people and a lot of cheers, and we'll see where you fall after this episode. So this is the story of Daniel D.C. Cormier. When you hear the word champion, what comes to mind? Do you picture a specific individual? A symbol of achievement like a belt or a trophy? Is it an attitude or a mindset that you imagine? Perhaps it's all of the above. But no matter how you define a champion, the subject of our episode today embodies all of these and more. And after listening to this episode, we're convinced that when you hear the word champion, you'll think Daniel Cormier.
Okay, so not going to derail the train right off the bat, and I'm going to save this for a lot of the Untold stuff, but just for anybody out there feeling like me when Taylor says that, I do have to say I do slightly disagree with that. I do know Cormier's story. We've followed him forever, and we've done the research, but I just want to say, like, it may not be who he is truly. He may not actually be a champion, because the bottom line is, no matter how you cut it, he has fallen short in the biggest fights of his life every single time. Every single time, Daniel Cormier has never truly been number one. He's always number one with an asterisk. So I'll fight that battle with you later, but I can't let you say no matter what you're going to think champion, because I don't know that that's true.
You may not, but I have a feeling that a lot of our listeners are going to have a different understanding of the word champion, or at least the way that I understand the word champion.
And don't get me wrong, I love Daniel Cormier, and we'll get there, but because I also love people like Charles Barkley. Like, he's a very lovable guy. I just think there's some issues when he gets to the biggest stage sometimes.
All right, well, Daniel's story begins in Lafayette, Louisiana on March 20th, 1979. Cormier is one of 4 children. His father, Joseph, and mother, Audrey, are divorced when Daniel is about the age of 3. And soon after, his mother, Audrey, remarries, and Daniel's stepfather, Percy, becomes the primary male influence in Cormier's life. But 3 years later, the first major tragedy in Cormier's life, and we'll see a lot of them, happens, and Percy is going to become Daniel's rock and role model.
So when you think of, like, tragedy, it could be, for instance, in this case, it's the death, right, of a family member. But think about sitting around with your family, as he says, watching The Color Purple, at Thanksgiving Day, right, and where everybody comes together, and it's supposed to be a good time with family, and, like they say, give thanks. Sitting on the floor, mom gets a phone call, and she drops the phone and just starts screaming. DC, being as young as he is, doesn't
He's
really
7 at the time.
7,
right?
yeah, doesn't know really how to comprehend this, and finds out that his dad has been murdered by his in-law. Mm-hmm. So this is the very beginning of his life, and then, like, the obstacles he's going to start to overcome.
Yeah, so he's 7 years old, sitting there at Thanksgiving, and he finds out that his father, the parents are divorced, and he's now at his new in-laws, was murdered by his father's second wife's father because they got in some type of argument. So he decided to shoot him. To me, that's the goddamn opposite of what Thanksgiving is all about. I don't know what happened there, but I don't understand. I'll never understand how shit gets that out of hand at these like family.
My family fights, but not like
seriously,
that. That's crazy.
I mean,
there's always an argument somewhere happening,
but
at least with
wild.
my family. But it's like not to the extent of like wanting to actually hurt somebody.
But that's so fucked
And
up.
I think it's turns out the guy or the father-in-law ended up getting nothing happened. He set free. Nothing happened. I think what it was I think DC said something in the tune of, well, she lost her husband. She didn't want to lose her dad too. So she kind of said it was like a self-defense thing.
Is that why he keeps hammering home that it was the dad's
On
property?
his property.
Because he keeps saying that.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that part of it. Okay.
And Daniel makes it clear, at this point, he wasn't estranged from his father, but they didn't have the closest relationship. He views Percy as his father. He says later when he does win the belt, him and Percy are backstage celebrating. That's his dad.
Absolutely.
He's celebrating with his dad. So let's not confuse this. It's not someone that he was really close with, but it's still his father. It's still his paternal father.
And are you going to talk a lot about like the work ethic he took from Percy and everything like that? I don't know if you've.
I was just going to say,
we can get
like,
into that.
This is kind of like where, when you hear DC talk about it, you can tell Percy had an impact right away. DC says he'd wake up 7 a.m., go work for the city, come home, eat, shower, and then for the rest of the night do dishes at a pizza parlor. Like.
Or mow lawns at a cemetery. Anything he could do.
To make sure they can make ends meet. And that, with all those kids and, DC just, they just clicked, And that's something that I can relate to. Like, that's, my stepdad came into my life at a time where my parents divorced. And everything that I am today, kind of how DC is because of that man. So,
well,
I understand.
And to that point, I liked how Cormier says that like when he actually took the kids, so Percy would take them sometimes with him to mow the lawn at the cemetery, so Daniel could kind of see what hard work's all about. And I love how that's kind of been instilled in him, and now he wants to like bring his kids to the gym and kind of see what hard work's all about.
Yeah, and his kids are very active. They're doing everything. Wrestling tournaments. One is actually in combat now. So
you can see it's translated to the next generation.
Did you notice maybe this is just coincidence, but did you notice when he talks in interviews about his own training, he says the articles I've read is he's headed to the gym at 6:30 and he starts his training at 7 a.m. It's just interesting that he said Percy would start work at 7 a.m. And Cormier starts work at 7 a.m.
I think he views it, you're right, I think you're dead on, because I think he views it the same way how Percy had the multiple jobs, because you can see Cormier's like, I go train, I come home, I shower, I go with my kids, I go back and work again.
He coaches, which
exactly.
we'll get into.
So that's important. I mean, this stuff is, tragedy turns into a teachable thing, and these values are instilled in him by his stepfather. And this translates on into current times, on into today. So with that support and guidance, Cormier presses forward, but being a smaller, passive kid, he ends up being bullied quite frequently. And one bully in particular torments Cormier from 2nd grade to 4th grade, and really on past that. But those 2 years, he says, like his life was controlled by this bully.
Did you guys... I was listening to an interview. You heard his name, the bully's name. Did you hear it?
No.
Gilbert Francis.
Perfect.
Right?
Sounds very intimidating.
You know what I think of when I hear Gilbert Francis?
A boy named Sue?
Pee Wee Herman.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Pee Wee's Big Adventure, where he's just like, he tries to steal his bike. He's just a big bully. And
now I'm just thinking about Large Marge. So now I'm going to have nightmares tonight. Way to go.
So that's all I think about. And I actually think... Watching an interview, I think it was recent, this year even, where they bring it up. They're like, hey, DC, you were bullied. And I don't know, obviously, DC can handle this, as he calls 4.5 foot tall individual now. But I think he was traumatized, might be an intense word, but I think he was really affected by this kid, because even them questioning him, like, why did you leave? So we get
Tell the
into
story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we get
yeah.
into he's in town at his
The
mom's
bully
house.
or Cormier's in town, right?
Cormier's
This is a
in his
grown
hometown.
man. He's a grown man at this point. Yep.
And he asks, this Gilbert Francis asks his brother for DC's number. And DC's like, why would you give him my number? So he calls him. He says, DC, are you at your mom's house? And he lies. He's like, yeah. He's like, stay there. And if you don't, you know what'll happen to you. He's like, dude, this isn't 1985 anymore. Like, you can't do this.
It's funny because when DC starts telling this story that the former bully asked for his number,
Yeah.
I'm picturing like a Billy Madison scenario where like he's gonna call and apologize to him.
Yes.
You know? But then he's still trying to punk a UFC light heavyweight champion.
And it kind of works.
And it
Cormier
works.
runs,
Yeah.
which is what
So
you were getting
Cormier,
at.
Yeah, so Cormier, he ends up leaving. And they were like, what? I thought you were going to like give him the smackdown or something like that. And he was like, no, I didn't. Nope. I just felt like this was the opportunity for him not to control my life anymore. But then, like, just his facial expressions, like, during all of this, it kind of is like he didn't want anything to do with it, probably because he knew, one, he may have gotten in trouble.
Yeah.
But I think it has some type of effect.
I agree. I think it still haunts him a little bit, but there is a little bit of obviously there's a lot of maturity in not entertaining this bully at this point in his life, and it's a little bit tongue in cheek too.
Mm-hmm.
He knows he can mop the floor with this guy. But there's a little bit of like humor that he's made light of this situation. This guy literally did torment him for years of his adolescent life, and he's able to kind of laugh about it and joke about it. Obviously, he's one of the toughest men in the entire world.
When I think it may have helped him too, because think about every DC fight. He's always smaller, always shorter, maybe
Usually shorter, yeah.
the midsection's a little bigger, but
Except in
no,
that
he's
Hoy
always
Nelson fight.
he's always smaller. So it's like, this is just, it starts young. He was smaller then, and he's always smaller growing up, and he's still on top.
Well, it may seem like a throwaway funny story, but it does matter because we're going to obviously go over John Jones a lot in this. And do you think if John Jones got a phone call from a former bully that the guy was on the way to beat his ass or whatever, that John Jones would leave?
I think he would seek that guy out.
Yes, that would be an incident with
Yes.
John Jones.
Yes.
And that's the difference between Cormier and Jones, is that Cormier takes the high road, makes the jokes on the interviews about like, I don't know why I ran away. But in his heart, he's a family man. He doesn't want any legal trouble. He doesn't want to put a blemish on the UFC. This is a big difference. And these are these things that are going to keep popping up with him, why he should not be booed because he
Yes.
always does the right thing. You know what I mean?
Yes. And no one would fault him for beating
No.
up this bully.
Yeah.
You
You expect that, like you said, you expect that to be the end of the story.
Well, I'll bring this. So mark this, for when we come back in the Untold part, and I am sort of defending my introduction about him being a champion. That mentality, that mindset, we just recently heard George St. Pierre giving a similar story about running into a former bully and helping the guy out. And then the guy calling him and thanking him and getting his life back on track. And again, George St. Pierre, I think of as in a similar way, as somebody who's always taking the high road, trying to do the right thing. And you're right. There's going to be a lot of strong contrast between Daniel Cormier and John Jones, and we'll get into all those. I do want to mention that I think at 11 years old, Cormier said he did finally get the better of the guy. He wrestled him. He took him down, and put him in a half Nelson.
Yep.
Was this a sanctioned? Was this an actual?
No, this
wrestling?
was
All
11
right,
years old.
There we
this
go.
is 11.
Right.
So he did finally get over on the bully. He used his wrestling that he had learned at a young age to finally put the bully down.
Nice.
And so Cormier is going to continue to use that wrestling. And while at Northside High, he's going to win 3 state championships and amass a record of over 100 wins and only 9 losses. And he also, while there, excels in football. He goes all-state at linebacker, and he receives a scholarship from LSU, which he turns down. But while in his junior and senior year in high school, there's 2 more tragedies that happen, and these are going to hurt more than any of the 9 losses inside the gym or any losses out on the football field.
Yeah, and coming from he was actually I didn't know this about DC going in. I knew he played. I didn't know he was all state, and Louisiana's a pretty decent state for football, and getting a full scholarship to LSU and turning it down. Dude ran a 4.5 as a linebacker. That's nuts. Right?
I think that sometimes when these guys don't have the biggest or the best physique or whatever, people get so caught up on, again, we make jokes on here about him, the little round, in the midsection.
Robust.
But look, he's a freak athlete because he's dominating wrestling, dominating football. Like, don't forget that. It gets completely lost. And it's not until you later on see him rag down some of these guys in the cage that you're like, oh, shit, he's a freak.
Yeah.
Don't ever forget that.
Well, on the way home from one of these games that they had, hit one of his close friends coming home from a football game, got in a car accident, right, and died. And this is now another, I guess, blocking the road for him, kind of like, his dad and whatnot. And then soon, I believe that they were pretty close to each other within a year or so.
It was within a year.
His cousin would then also die in
a car
accident. So this is something that, we'll definitely touch on later, and why DC feels so strongly about some of the actions that have happened, say, with John Jones. And what I think people don't understand why he hits home, like why
he's
hits him so hard.
So heavy.
Upset by John Jones. Yeah. So I mean, two big things. If you've ever lost a best friend or a teammate, that's big. You lose a cousin. You lost your father already, and it doesn't end here. More is going to happen, but Cormier turns down that football scholarship. He wrestles at a community college and transfers to a Division I school of Oklahoma State. You got something to say?
Wow. I am so surprised. You guys aren't going to say the name of this community college?
Go ahead.
No, I don't want to, because I don't want to say it again on this podcast for like the fourth podcast in a row.
What?
Now I'm curious.
I don't even remember what community college you went to.
Colby Community College.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. You mean the world champion or?
Now this is 5 episodes in a row now that we've said that fucker's name
Streaks
on this
alive.
podcast.
That's
So
world champ.
DC went to Covington Community College.
Get used to it.
That's right. Well, he graduates from Oklahoma State University, again, an All-American, this time in wrestling, with an illustrious record, and he joins the U.S. national team with the hopes of making the Olympics. And so at this point, things in Daniel's life were lining up just as he had planned. And on March 6, 2003, he welcomes his daughter, Caden, into the world. But again, just 3 months later, tragedy strikes, this time worse than ever before.
And I think, actually, didn't he just get married to his first wife, Robin, right?
Before that, he did, because actually Caden was he and his girlfriend's child.
Yeah.
Not Robin's.
Yeah, I just mean they had a fling. I thought, okay, maybe I'm messing up my timeline.
I think you're confusing the timeline here.
Maybe a little bit.
That's okay.
That's all right.
But let's focus on the tragedy here, because Cormier loses his 3-month-old or 3.5-month-old daughter.
So he's at a barbecue with Big Mo, or King Mo.
King Mo.
Or
Big Mo.
We call him Big Mo from now on.
King Mo. And they're at a barbecue just relaxing. Things are going great. He 1 week before the trials and everything, and he gets a phone call, and it's Texas Highway Patrol. And, he gets a phone call, and there'd been an accident. Leading up to the accident, the daughter was put into a friend's car because his girlfriend at the time, she didn't have AC. It's a hot day in Texas. She didn't want her kid riding in the car. So she put her in a friend's car to, get to where they're going, as she trailed behind. 18-wheeler struck the car from behind. Caden died instantly, and the other 2 girls in the car were injured. But getting that phone call when you're it almost seems like you're at your peak,
Well, there it is again. Every time we do this podcast, somehow these guys always when they're getting those new heights, there's always that earth-shattering event, and here it is again.
It's so strange, because when I'm making the notes, I feel like you can just plug in a different name. Yep. I feel like I'm writing the same notes for a lot of these episodes, the Cat Zanganos, the Roses, the DCs, Anthony Pettis's, whatever it is. You just tweaking a few things. But yeah, it's like
But
they
here's the
climb the
problem.
mountain and then they just get dumped on.
Here's the problem is this is such a recurring theme with Cormier, these car accidents, and obviously we're going to get to it later, but for the last time, where the fuck is the UFC on this when they're building up this feud? It's just the same, and they did a much better job this time, but it was more about John Jones's return.
And his
Sure.
fuck-ups,
Why
yeah.
don't we talk about, and we'll get to it, but why don't we talk about the fact that John Jones is causing these car accidents, having all these incidents in cars? We shouldn't have to, again, that's why we're here, but we shouldn't have to say that to you. This should be a major part of the story, and the UFC just doesn't get it out of them.
Yeah, I mean, this is really big. Cormier, I mean, he's preparing at this point for, Olympics.
Yeah.
And he basically, I mean, literally in one article, it says he just draws the curtains and just caves himself in and is just in a deep depression pretty much.
He didn't go anywhere. He only went to wrestling practice, which is it tells us something about what wrestling did for him. But when he was at wrestling practice, he was aggressive, he was angry, he was mad, and practice wasn't. It was, I think it was like, as it is for many people, like an outlet of like letting shit out that shouldn't be there.
Isn't that how it was for Kat? Didn't Kat go back to the gym kind of as an
Yes.
escape after
Yes,
she lost
she
her
did.
husband?
But I think it's for the wrong reason, right? And his coach, he tells him, you don't want to hear this, but if you want to honor your daughter, you need to jump back into the sport that has given you everything and let it get it through you through this dark time.
And he does just that.
Yeah, he does just that, and I think he becomes better than ever. He lets that motivate him, and he just takes it to everybody.
Yeah, this is a huge, huge turning point in Cormier's story because he takes this tragedy, he turns it into fuel, and he lets it propel him to the world team and ultimately a 4th place finish at the 2004 Olympics. And he makes the Olympic team again 4 years later in 2008, but this time he's the team captain at this point. So they made him the team captain, but he gets pulled from competition due to renal failure.
And make sure to go. His game plan was to get gold or whatever, win this, and then call it. He was going to retire.
He was going to be done.
So this is his big moment here. He's going to go out on top, and so he makes the weight, but along the way caused detrimental effects on his body. He had a total meltdown. Was a severe dehydration, caused the renal failure.
Take him to the hospital.
Wouldn't let him compete.
Yep.
And the crazy part, I always think about this with the Olympics, is to put yourself in his shoe. Is this is supposed to be his big moment, his grand finale. He trains for 4 years for it, and just discipline with his diet. He let himself down. He says it himself. You know what I mean? And that's just, I can't imagine doing something for 4 years and then blowing it on your diet.
Like the day before.
Yeah. That's crazy. And there's no reason to keep going over it because I'm sure he's had to live with it forever, but that's insane.
And it was like a wrestling expert. He said the saddest part about this whole thing is that he could have beaten anybody in his weight class. The gold was not out of reach. It was almost it would be disappointing if he didn't win gold. That's how it was. And
over a weight cut.
Having that on the back of your mind, as well as everything else that has happened, man.
And then you see now as a grown man, he can hit even older. Your body slows down a little bit. He can still hit 205, and this was 211. I mean, he should have hit it. Every which way you cut it, he should have hit it. He let himself down, and that sucks. But obviously, he grows from it.
But I do want to mention that here, just as like a little stepping stone to what we'll get to later. I do think this is still part of what makes him a champion, is that ability to push himself to make weight. Yeah, he gets pulled, and he's hospitalized, and yeah, it's not good, and that's been a theme in mixed martial arts lately of guys pushing themselves past the point of where they should to make weight. But he makes it. He doesn't miss weight. And we've seen a lot of professional athletes miss weight. And like you said,
except for Towelgate, I don't know
don't
what
worry
that
about
was,
Towelgate.
but
He made it.
Hey, I know this is. I have to be the voice of our like 3 John Jones fans. I mean, Towelgate was weird.
He made it.
Did he?
Don't worry about it.
Did he? All right.
Either way,
cheating, you ain't trying.
Yeah.
that's right. So anyway, after his brush with kidney failure, while sitting on a friend's couch watching UFC 100, Cormier decides he's going to try his hand at MMA.
But can we go over what he was doing in between?
Yes,
For the
please
4
tell
months
the
or whatever?
listeners,
That he
yes.
was playing NBA 2K9
Yes,
nonstop.
please talk about this.
And yet it's somehow relevant because he said he got so good, he ended up being like top 100 in the world.
Yes.
And he actually was sitting there like, if I put, this is the moment the 3 of us need to have right now.
Yeah, right.
If I take this time I put into this video game and put it elsewhere, I might be really good at something. And sure as shit, here comes MMA. He does put the effort into
Doesn't he talk to King
Mo
Mo?
is like, hey, I went in there and fought for 1 minute and made 60 grand. Like, you should come do this. It's amazing. And so he's like, well, put the controller down for a bit and give this a shot.
So he tries it. He joins Bob Cook and AKA, and it's not long before he's fighting, and he's making quick work of his first 6 opponents. He finishes all but one of them inside the first round, finishes the other one in the second round. So 6 finishes, 5 of them in the first round, and then 2 fights later, he's in one of the most revered mixed martial arts tournaments of all time. And if you recall from our Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix episode, Cormier was never meant to compete in that tournament, but he was eventually added due to a series of fortunate events for him, and then he enters the tournament, and that's all he needed.
Okay, so before we get into the tournament, because that is a turning point, we kind of blew past a little bit when he started at AKA. Did you read or hear the story where the first time he ever trained with Cain, and he gets in there with Cain Velasquez, who at this point they're like inseparable. It's like become a meme at this point, the way they look at each other. And the very first time they trained together, it was like 1.5 minutes in. Cormier was a complete disaster because I think he showed up at like 263 pounds or something. He was totally overweight. And a minute and a half in, he's just throwing up everywhere, can't do anything. Cain just massacred him. And it's just cool to see that in no time, he's winning the Strikeforce tournament, which we're about to get to, which is that tournament was a really big deal, and he does it in a matter of no time. I mean, shit, I think it was 3 weeks after he started training MMA, he had his very first fight, and I loved the psychology of, well, hey, if I can't stand with him, I can always make it a wrestling match, and in his head, if I go into a fight, I'm scared. But if I know that I'm going into a wrestling match, if shit goes south, I've always got that. And you see that with a lot of these wrestlers. And we always hear that that's in the game plan, but it's cool to hear somebody actually say it. So obviously it works, and all the way to the point where he quickly goes from being an alternate in this tournament to winning the whole thing.
And just a side note, at AKA, 5 years after that 1.5 minute debacle with Cain, he's acknowledged as team captain.
There you go. Exactly.
It's just crazy. I mean, he said he was a team captain in high school for his wrestling team, in college for the wrestling team, for the Olympics.
Yep.
And then
USA,
now at AKA.
Team USA.
Well, a lot of people, again, not everybody, but a lot of people would pack up and go home and go to a different gym if they go to anyone after a showing like that. That's embarrassing, and you have a lot of pride when you're a former Olympian and everything, but right back at it, didn't give a shit.
You could tell that the drive was still there. And I think that's what the coaches saw, too. They're like, he's a former Olympian. He knows what it takes. You just have to get him motivated for something. And maybe Cain seemed to be the beginning of that motivation for him to just set him
AKA
off.
was big at the time. I mean, that's John Fitch, Josh Koscheck, Cain, Luke Rockhold.
Oh, yeah.
There's some big names there. And now it's one of the most recognized gyms, I think, out there, period.
Oh,
well,
absolutely.
At one point,
they had some belts.
Yeah. It was
Man.
like 3 belts or something like that.
I mean, yeah,
2, 3?
I don't know precisely how it aligned,
Outside
but I mean, you
of the
had
UFC
Rockhold,
even.
Cormier, Cain. I mean, they were on a roll.
I think they even had a belt outside the UFC, if I'm not
Probably.
mistaken, yeah.
But
Nuts.
so when you get into this tournament, we did the episode on the Strikeforce tournament, and the way we viewed that episode is it is almost like the Daniel Cormier origin story is the way we kind of told it, because that really is his coming out party. He's an alternate. No one expected him to win, and he's going in there against monsters, and he just plowed through everybody. So if you're into Daniel Cormier, if you don't know much about the Strikeforce tournament, go give that a listen. Well, you can too. That's gonna be in the archives pretty soon.
It may be in the archives.
Possibly.
So yeah, hurry up.
Just while you can grab it, because it's an awesome story, and really that's when you get to find out what he's really all about.
That's our first introduction. My first introduction
definitely.
to him was in that tournament.
Truth be told, I know we'll get to this stuff later, but I didn't take him seriously for a very long time. Very, very long time. I just thought it was fluky, even though I knew, like, when he wins that tournament, spoiler alert, but people like Overeem leave the tournament, and he never has to deal with someone
Fedor.
like Overeem. He never has to deal with Fedor. And in my head, I was like, nah, it's bullshit. He wouldn't have beat those guys. Well, not true. Not true at all.
So after the Strikeforce tournament, Cormier makes his heavyweight debut in the UFC against a legend, Frank Mir, who we've also covered on this show if you want to hear his episode. And many thought that jump in competition, you included, Tim, might prove a little too steep for the young Cormier.
That's a fact. I did.
Yes.
That was not true, though.
But Cormier proved Tim and the rest of his doubters wrong, defeating Mir in a unanimous decision, followed by another unanimous decision over Scrappy Gratton's favorite, Big Country Roy Nelson.
So you realize this is Taylor's way of just stabbing us
This
because
is his revenge, yeah.
because he knows we're gonna get to him later for UFC 200.
Anderson, yeah.
Exactly. So
It is a
Gotta
miracle
get into
that
my jabs
we're
while I
so
can.
high on Cormier because he's just like broken all of our hearts.
Oh.
He really
Very
is.
true.
Yeah, it's so weird. But that actually says a lot about him.
And then he moves to light heavyweight after that.
yeah.
Explain why to the listeners. Why does he move to light heavyweight?
So we mentioned just 2 minutes ago that him and Kane created this relationship, and that there are these memes the way they look at each other, and it's like Jack Dawson and Rose from Titanic on
There
the,
goes the
on the
man
front
card.
of the
Your,
boats.
your man card was already in trouble, and you go back to Titanic.
Dude, Titanic's a great.
Unbelievable.
All right, we're not gonna get into that, but no. So he moves down because he realized that he is climbing the top, and he's gonna have to fight Kane. And DC, the only person, and not that he would fight. They would never fight one, but the only person DC says he would lose to is Kane. And I think it's a show of respect because Kane was at the top. And DC knew he could make that weight. Kane can't make that weight.
Unlike, am I going to make the Rashad?
Yes, go ahead.
Parallel?
Yep,
Yeah.
I was about to say the same thing.
Okay.
Same thing. Good
Same
Lord.
thing.
Same. Well, I mean, we keep paralleling John Jones, and what would John Jones do in this situation? Well, we saw. I mean, Rashad had the belt.
Yep.
And John Jones was like, yeah, I'll fight you.
Yep.
Let's go.
Totally betrayed Rashad.
Completely betrayed Rashad.
To the point
get-
where Rashad left, and that's how the
Yep.
Black Zillions came about. And I mean, that there again is the difference. It's going to keep popping up between the two. Just Cormier, all class. John Jones, selfish. And hey, you got to do what you got to do, but
And here's what I'm going to kind of defend Jones in this sense. Like, at some point, you have to look out for yourself.
Of course.
Just like Woodley. Like, if a Masvidal won, they're on the same team. They would have fought. And Colby, actually, they're on the same team. But there's reasons why they don't like each other. But at some point, I think you have to look out for yourself. I think Jones kind of did the right thing. Like, listen, I know I can be champion for a long time, so I'm going to do this. But he did have the option of heavyweight. He's a big guy.
I'm not in any way saying it's the wrong thing to do. I'm just saying that if you are like Cormier and you take the high road, you're pure class because he's so selfless that he's like, fine, I'll make my weight cut harder, which has been a huge problem for him, by the way, and move down just so I don't screw up my friends.
And prove that he belongs still anywhere he goes.
Well, he's dominant. What was he,
Dominating.
14 or 15 and
15
0
and
at
0
heavyweight?
heavyweight, yeah.
So you're talking about
not
moving weight class. Guys move weight classes when they're on a losing streak or when they can't make weight.
Yep.
They change weight classes.
He's 15 and 0.
He's 15 and 0, about to fight for the title, and he changes weight classes. That's insane. And to your point, Tim, it's not a shot at John Jones. I don't know what we would do in that situation. It's just more to highlight what Cormier did, is to show what John Jones did for the point of adding emphasis to how much of a sacrifice that is for Cormier to take that risk of going down and trying to lose the weight and fighting different opponents. But he does it, and it works out for him for a little while. So, he beats Dan Henderson. Well, Patrick Cummings first, which
Yeah.
they had their own feud, and if you want to touch on it, you can.
It was pretty cool at the time. I mean,
Yeah.
again, they did a good job of on really short notice telling Cummins' story where he was. I mean, was it a matter of 6-7 days? He takes the fight and gets the call when he's at the coffee shop from his manager working. He's like a barista or whatever, and they tell him, he's like, I need to leave. I just got a contract to go fight in the UFC. I got to fight this Saturday. And they're like, if you leave, you're fired. And he left. And good on the UFC. They stayed true. He's still around all these years later. They kept him around, but he fights DC on short notice because they did a really good job of telling the story that they were training partners, and Cummins made him. Was it the story? Was he made him cry?
Yeah, he made him cry in the wrestling room.
Yeah, and that's pretty awesome. Cormier disputes some of the details in it, but it made for a really good story, and Cormier beat the shit out of him.
Oh, he mops the floor
But
with
in
him
case
in
you
the
guys
first
want to
round.
know who I am, Tim's the guy. I'm the guy literally that when they're telling this story, I'm like, God, Cummins is going to beat him. It's going to happen. So I'm literally running to like Bodog, and I'm like placing bets on Cummins, and it just gets his ass beat. And I'm like, they got me. They suckered me again. Every
and then
time.
he ragdolls Dan Henderson. I mean, picks him
God.
up
Oh my
and
God.
throws
That
him through the air.
iconic slam. We were just at UFC 225, and that's on that video, like the face to pain video. Like, it's iconic. He's done it to anybody. Dan Henderson was a huge name. Did it to him. Sorry, he did it to the Mauler, Alexander Gustafsson, and he did it to John Jones. So like, and did he do it to?
I think he did it to Frank.
I think he did it to Frank Mir too.
I think he did.
Didn't need to say that.
Yeah.
One, okay.
So this is about the time, I'm 100% on the Cormier bandwagon at this point. And my aunt and uncle follow the UFC kind of from a distance. And they didn't really care for John Jones, wanted him to lose. And so they would always ask me when he had a fight coming up, how is his opponent? Do they stand a chance? And when it got to Cormier, because he's about to face John Jones, I said, you know what? This guy really does have a chance. I know he looks small. I know he looks out of shape, but look at this. He's throwing Dan Henderson over his head, across the octagon. This guy is serious, serious business. So that highlight reel, those things really proved that this guy was ready for the challenge of John Jones.
There was definitely a feeling going into that. The vibe was that he would be the one because, again, when someone like John Jones is a world-class athlete. His brothers are in the NFL. They're NFL superstars. Genetically, he's a genetic freak. But the thing is when somebody's a genetic freak and doesn't have the greatest credentials like Jones, the only thing you can hold up against that is you can go, well, the thing is Daniel Cormier was an Olympian. And to the point where they thought he was going to win gold in 2008 when he couldn't compete. So he might be literally the best in the world at what he does. So he can hold his own against John Jones. That makes some of the shit that happens in that fight even crazier because Daniel Cormier was the best at what he did. No matter which way you put it, he could have been the best. And Jones goes in there and does what he does.
Yeah, so, this point, Cormier's undefeated. And then the only thing that's eluded him to this point is that championship belt. So he's going up against John Jones, who proves to be an arch nemesis in every sense of the word. It's
like a blood feud. I mean,
well,
holy shit.
It starts with DC was respectful and wanted to meet John Jones. And John Jones, like, I don't even know who you are. Like, it's one of those things, like, it's so disrespectful. And
tried to big league him.
Yeah, seriously. And then that's when, like, it goes south. Like, the fight happens, oh God, that was heartbreaking.
Was the build up to the first fight when Jones makes fun of his weight? I think it was.
Probably.
Because he calls Cormier fat, out of shape, and then Cormier makes that gorgeous video all about that cake. If you haven't seen that video, please look that video up.
It is
because Cormier
fantastic.
is a huge fan of, he's from Louisiana, so he's a huge fan of Popeye's chicken and cake, apparently. So he makes a video all about that cake and chicken. And it is
absolutely phenomenal.
It is. It's a good piece.
Maybe we'll leave it at the end of the episode as a little treat for you.
Absolutely.
Now, was that build up? Was that the one where the mics were on ESPN, or was that the second? I think that was the first one.
That was
right?
the first one, yeah.
That first fight, it got, first of all, we always shit on the UFC. That had was the first one to save the date poster, like a wedding invitation. That was fucking awesome. It's like save the date, Jones versus Cormier. Gets delayed because I think Jones gets hurt or whatever. Was it Jones that got hurt the first? I think he got hurt, actually.
It's tough to keep track of that because Cormier always has a broken hand.
Right, but in the meantime, they had that incident with the hot mics. So I think that's why everyone got so upset. I could be mixing up the dates on it, but there was this awesome build to it. And with these hot mics, and we should definitely try to play that. I don't know if we have access to that. I'm sure we do, but that clip is out of control.
We'll play a little bit of that here.
Hey, pussy, are you still there? I'm here. Yeah. I'm here. You're just the fakest person. I actually admire that you can actually be this fake. And like when the TV comes on, how you can just change. It's like you're a chameleon.
Hey, listen,
it's awesome.
I'm a professional.
It is unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
The fact that you're a pussy hasn't changed.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how fake you can really be. Like, you are just such a fucking pussy. My God. It is amazing. It is amazing. But you know what? Hats off to you. You got a great PR person. Because they do a great job with training you. Because you are just terrible. You're the fucking scum of the earth. You are a terrible human being, but you can sure turn it on, huh?
Thank you.
I wish they would let me next door so I could spit in your fucking face.
You know I would absolutely kill you if you ever did something like that,
You
right?
could never kill me.
Oh, I bet you I could.
Then you should try, John. You really should try, John.
No, I would literally kill you if you spit in my face.
Yeah, let's try that, John.
Literally kill you.
Let's try that, John.
I'm not saying I would fight you. I said I would kill you.
John, do you think? So, John, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, John?
Okay, yeah, that's incredible. That's one of my favorite things. Like, that's as far as the feuds go. That's one of my favorite clips ever. That was out of control, and you get to see them again, not holding anything back. Cormier says a lot that he protects what he says. He's careful because he's worried his kids are going to hear it. Mm-hmm. It's just great when the mics, they don't think they're on. What they say, holy shit. Those guys, they do not like each other.
This is, we will hit on this theme. I know we keep saying later in the episode, but we will touch on this. I mean, Cormier is your quintessential good guy. He's a U.S. Olympian. He does everything above board. He, integrity out the rear.
Yeah.
And then there's John Jones on the other side of this, and we'll get into that right now, what happens after this fight. But it's just, I want to make the comparison if anybody's seen the movie Unbreakable. I mean, this is really the comic book definition of an arch nemesis. I mean, they are polar opposites, and yet they share this weird bond. They can't break away from each other.
It's literally connected. Batman and the Joker. That's
yes,
like the exact thing is they're like connected. What I love about it is even recently, not to keep bringing up Colby Covington, but a lot of the talk about him has been how manufactured it is, and that it's a ripoff of Conor and Chael. And Chael is very manufactured. This is the real deal. They fucking hate each other. Yeah. This is not manufactured to the point where the mics are off. Okay, so that's all you need to know. They didn't know they were on, and they thought they were off. And look what they're talking to each other about.
This is Hoist Ken, Chuck Tito.
Yeah, this is the real
Rashad
deal.
Rampage. This is vitriol
absolutely.
at its finest.
And that's like man, it's hard. We shouldn't even have to explain that either because it feels real. There's a thing where something happens, you're like, yeah, that's real. But like, no, this here, like, it hits you. It's like, damn, they have more hate for each other than I probably love anything. Well, it's crazy.
Sometimes in MMA and boxing, there's these amazing build-ups, and right afterwards they're shaking hands and laughing, and it kind of like kills the fun because you're like, oh, was it all an act? It makes you wonder. You have to wonder the entire time. But
Mayweather McGregor.
Right. Like Mayweather like gets the painting of him and McGregor, and you're like, oh my God. But this, no. I mean, even, again, we'll get to the second fight, but in that post-fight interview, John Jones says everything right, but then it just starts to come out that that's even fraudulent. Like, through and to the end, like, they hate each other, and it's never going to change. They're feuding now.
And I'm going to get into right now to why they hate each other. So, John Jones beats Cormier in a decision. And
4 rounds to 1. It wasn't close at all.
We gonna talk about the
Right.
perception of that fight? Are we gonna get to that? I mean,
Yeah, go.
holy
I mean,
shit.
go ahead. So Jones wins the fight by decision. I think he wins 4 rounds to 1.
I just want to call out some people like Brendan Schaub and people that shit on that fight. That was a very competitive fight. I think the issue was Gustafsson before or after that. Gustafsson Jones.
It was before
Was it
that.
before? Maybe that was the issue because people tried to view this like it was this one-sided affair. It was a very good fight. Cormier clearly wins 1 round, and you can debate some of the others. And I just don't appreciate when people look back on it and they act like Cormier got his ass beat. Brendan Schaub, when they started to talk about a second fight, was saying he wanted nothing to do with it because Cormier got his ass kicked.
He did get his ass kicked. It wasn't close on the scorecards, but
Right, but we know MMA scoring.
Exactly.
A
It's a
10-9
shit
can be
show.
bullshit.
And no, I mean DC. You think about what John Jones was doing to everybody, and even the Gustafsson fight, like that could be the greatest
My
fight of
favorite
all
fight.
time,
It's
right?
my favorite fight of all time.
And even then, like they're both bruised and battered, whereas this one it felt more as a chess match. Like I know what this guy's capable of, and I'm not going to like attack. And it's, they came out, yeah, they had some cuts and bruises, but to me, it was the ultimate chess match.
Well, Cormier gets tired in this fight.
Oh,
I mean, we just got to call
clearly.
it 4th and 5th
Yep.
round. Cormier is exhausted. He didn't prepare conditioning wise as well as he should have. That doesn't take anything away from John Jones. John Jones becomes the first person to take Cormier down inside the octagon, and he was taking him down over and over. And I mean, it was
insane.
shocking. It really was. But no matter how good you are at wrestling, if you have zero energy, you can't defend a takedown.
Well, didn't he say you let the emotions get the best of him?
Yeah,
too? So it was
there's
like
an adrenaline dump for
And that's
sure.
all his fault. I mean, it's not making excuses. That's a fuck
that's-
up.
Is this like think about this? So he builds up. He's almost guaranteed to win 2008 gold medal at the Olympics. Builds up the day before. His own doing, it fails. Right, he gets pulled. This one, he's definitely a true contender for John Jones, and because maybe his conditioning or he let his emotions get the best of him, that's the reason why he lost. So it's 2 times now he's been up for gold, almost could win it, guaranteed.
Yep.
And to his own doing, he kind of fails.
Yeah, it speaks a lot about him. But I also think, again, you can't take anything away from Jones. And when we finally do a John Jones episode, this will be one of the things that I compliment him on. He has a way of making his opponents, Rashad Evans, Daniel Cormier, he has a way of making his opponents that should be able to contend with him let their emotions get the better of him. So, again, he is a masterful villain. As
He
good
really
as
is.
Cormier
Yep.
is, as good as Cormier is about being the ultimate good guy, John Jones is just as good at being a villain. He really, and he just needs to embrace it.
He just can't figure it out.
He's gotta embrace
he just
it,
can't
Jones.
figure it out. He literally is. He's such a good bad guy that people
He's
root
such a
for
good bad
him
guy.
instead of Cormier. They boo Cormier, and it makes zero sense.
The scales are a little bit off, and one of the reasons is because shortly after this fight, 5 months later, something like that, John Jones is in a hit and run. So John
who,
Jones,
though?
A pregnant woman.
a pregnant woman.
Yeah.
So John Jones.
Oh boy.
It's not just a hit and run. It's who he's in a hit and run
So
with.
Jones is under the influence. He flees the scene, so no one can really say what he's under the influence
Well, didn't he come?
of.
Don't forget, he came back to get his money and pipe. I
But he
believe.
comes back to get his money and
And then
pipe,
ran away.
and he's busted down the road for doing cocaine. And all the fighters and analysts kind of under the table are saying like Jones was a big partier, and he was doing cocaine all the time. At
Yeah,
this
wasn't the
point in
coke? I
story.
think that was weed. I think the coke was an out of competition drug test that got
Right.
released accidentally.
Sure, but what I'm saying
Yeah.
is he may have been on coke, marijuana,
Oh, God knows.
alcohol, who
Yep.
knows what. But he hits a pregnant woman, flees the scene, and obviously you guys know at this point in Cormier's story, losing his daughter, his best friend, and his cousin in an automobile accident, that's not going to sit well with Cormier. So
and it's not going to sit well for one because he put himself in that situation. He was under the influence and he hit, but it was a hit and run, so it stings a little harder. And he didn't give a shit.
He doesn't seem to show remorse.
Nothing at all. A fake apology or what? I don't even think we heard anything really. And it was like, dude, how can you not have any sympathy for a woman? You could have just pretty much you took her life. You could have like basically ruined her life by one, either killing her, and what if that baby died because she was so stressed out?
Well, that's why that hits home to Cormier.
Yeah,
too.
I know.
He
I'm just
loses
saying,
his
like,
daughter,
but you have no
hers.
remorse for someone. Like, how do you?
He's an
I
egomaniac.
just don't get it.
Well, so there again, we're pulling out the differences between these two. I mean, Jones flees the scene. He runs away from responsibility. He runs away from standing up to this. And you know that if Cormier had been in the same situation, he would have gotten out and checked on the woman.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I mean, it's just a huge difference.
And don't they just settle out of court like hush money? Like they settle. Of course, just money saves or buys him out of every situation possible.
But as much as this pisses Cormier off, it also sets him up to win Jones's belt because the UFC strips Jones of the title. So now the belt is up for grabs. They put Cormier right back in against Anthony Rumble Johnson, and
holy shit.
That's a fight.
Okay. First of all, if anybody hasn't seen that fight, pause the podcast, go watch it right now. That first round when Rumble hits him, Cormier goes flying like across the cage.
It's like the Brock Lesnar Kane fight. Yeah. Where he's just like flipping across the cage like Brock Lesnar did.
Yeah. I was thinking of the Heath Herring where he's like beating the shit out of Herring. And
that too. Herring's flying all
Come
over.
on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it was like out of a video game, out of like Street Fighter or something. He just went flying across the cage. I just remember my jaw dropping, being like, oh my God, shit. Cormier is going to die. Well, he did not die. He got right fucking back up. It was like Fedor-esque.
Yeah.
Like Fedor gets dropped on his neck.
Yeah.
Dude, Cormier gets up and just smashes him. That fight's crazy.
It ended in a fourth round submission, right?
Yes.
Rear naked choke.
Yes.
Yeah. So that fight, oh man, when he gets rocked, because I think we're at your place for that, Tim, and I'm sitting there, oh God, like we need Jones to win. I mean, we need Cormier to win because we want to see Jones too.
Yeah, we're expecting Jones to come back at this point fairly soon.
And we felt that was the best outcome. And then all of a sudden, like he gets rocked and I'm like, what? Yeah. What's going on here? But then he submits him and boy, I don't know. Other than like maybe my favorite fighter winning, because they haven't won any belts, but other than them winning in general, I don't know if I've ever been like more excited. Like, actually, Rose was exciting.
Well, that era of Rumble, like, because everyone says TRT Vitor is like the scariest man ever, and they're probably right. But that era of Rumble, before DC kind of broke him a little bit and showed him that he can be broken, holy shit, was that man scary?
Yeah, he was scary.
Well, and think of it like TRT, that era of TRT, that's him juiced. Rumble's never been caught with anything. Right. That's just pure power. And he just cracks him. And we're like, how does he make it from that?
Well, so he does. He overcomes. He wins the fight, and he wins the belt. So he's a champion at this point. But, of course, what's on everybody's mind is that he's not really the champion. He's just a placeholder. Jones doesn't come back right away. Cormier fights Gustafsson, who went toe-to-toe with Jones, who I think, almost won that fight. I thought initially Gustafsson won the fight against Jones. Since watching it a second time, I don't think he did. But, man, it's almost an identical fight with Cormier. It's back and forth. It's toe-to-toe. I mean, that's a ridiculous fight.
It was a great fight. And it was one of those where I feel like it wasn't clear-cut. I felt like Gus could have won that fight, too. Yeah. So it's one of those, like, when they're fighting, we're thinking about, okay, do we want to see Jones-Gus 2 or do we want to see Jones-Cormier 2? Like, and the denominator there is Jones.
Yeah, Jones
but it's
is
like,
common denominator.
Man, it was a great fight. And I thought we were going to get, after this fight, I thought eventually we'd get the DC Gus 2, but just
still hasn't
worked out.
That may not be that far-fetched, though, Who knows? Give that a year. I know Cormier's only got a couple years left he wants to fight, or a year.
Next year.
Didn't Cormier say Gustafsson hit him like the hardest anyone's hit him?
Yeah, hurt him real bad.
Yeah.
So I think that's possible depending on what happens with Jones, the suspension. But
But yeah, two crazy fights back to back. You would think at this point he's earned a little bit of respect
People would
defending the
think
belt
that,
now, but still a lot of fans are not giving him the credit that's due him at this point. It's one of those things where he has to overcome that one obstacle. He has to get past Jon Jones. Literally, his legacy, his entire career is in the hands of Jon Jones. And Jon Jones comes back. He fights OSP. He looks shaky. Cormier's hurt at this point. They were
Cormier's
supposed to fight.
commentating on this.
Yep.
And he's pissed off at the opportunity because he's like,
it's a fair commentary, by the way.
Yeah.
It's a very fair commentary. But yes, there was a lot of times where they were supposed to fight, didn't fight. You have the brawl at the face-off, not even the weigh-ins, but the face-off at the MGM Grand. It was, it's still building. So Cormier's winning. Jones beats OSP. They're on a path. They're on a collision course to meet again. They're supposed to fight at UFC 200. And then it doesn't happen.
Weird. What was day out, 2 days out? 2 days out, maybe?
Oh, my gosh.
Jones fails.
Biggest 200. They just had the fiasco with Conor, so Conor gets pulled from it. And then...
But it's this epic event. It's a landmark event with this headline, maybe the biggest, best rivalry in modern day MMA. And then Jones gets pulled, fails a drug test.
Yep.
So he gets pulled from the card, and the saint that is Anderson Silva
dear Lord.
steps in, takes a fight on 1.5 days' notice.
You son of a bitch.
Against I'm writing the narrative because I'm literally narrating right now. He takes the fight at light heavyweight. Is it a light heavyweight?
Yeah.
Probably because he walks around real heavy.
Yeah.
205.
A lot of Big Macs. So Anderson takes the fight. Cormier is... I don't know how we can stress this. You can go probably find the footage of when Dana tells Cormier backstage that Jones is out. Cormier is... Cormier literally sits down in a fold-out chair backstage and is just like... It's like crying, screaming, like, no.
Slamming his leg. I remember, I remember that
He was
video.
so distraught.
He wanted to sign something that says he'd fight him anyway.
Yeah, he's like, I'll fight him anyway. I don't care. He can be on
something.
drugs, whatever. I'll fight him. This is devastating. So as much as I joke about Anderson Silva stepping up, which he did step up, Cormier stepped up in taking that fight on short notice. Because honestly, yes, Cormier with his wrestling is Anderson Silva's kryptonite, but it's still a dangerous fight. It's still Anderson Silva. It's
And
still
Silva
maybe
hurt
the
him.
greatest mixed martial artist of all time. You're going to fight on 1.5 days notice.
He goes from main event to, I think, the third fight on the card. And it just I'm not going to say DC got lucky, but Anderson hurt him with like 30 seconds to go in the third round. And it was a 3-round fight. So if it was a 5-round fight, who knows? Like, I'm not sure. But, a day and a half notice for both fighters. It helped save the card. I don't want to say it single-handedly saved the card because I don't think it did, but it at least helped. Cormier stayed on. You added Anderson. Yeah, but it helped. It's a feather in both of their caps, and it's also a name on Cormier's resume. So now again, we're talking Rumble, Gustafsson, Anderson Silva, and then he fights Rumble again. That's a lot, man.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
His resume.
And still, there's that looming presence of Jon Jones. He still has to get over this hurdle. So finally, Jon Jones comes back. And Cormier's done everything he can at this point. He's got his nemesis in front of him, and he's got his chance to silence the critics.
And at this point, with the way Jones had looked against OSP and the way Cormier had been looking, you're thinking maybe this is it. Maybe he's gonna get him this time, because a bunch of us were thinking like, well, that first fight was better than people thought. Cormier looks like he's in his prime. Jones may have been on the sauce, and now he might have to clean it up, because we had a pretty strong belief USADA was doing a good job at that time. And then the fight happens, and holy shit, Jon Jones, my God.
So Jon finishes him with a kick to the head, which Cormier said he would never finish him with. Because they made reference to that. Yep, he calls that early.
That call out that John Jones said, "I'm going to finish you with the left head kick." That was for the first fight.
Yep.
And then it got brought back up briefly for the second fight, but it was still there. Like,
it wasn't even. It wasn't like he was calling a shot. It was saying like he's seen a weakness in his game. I mean, it's not like a failed like I'm going to do it in this first fight. It was like, hey, we've seen a weakness in your game. We're going to knock you out with a head kick, and for that to fucking come back is insane. The guy's out of there. The guy is very troubled and he's an asshole, but he's a phenomenal fighter.
Incredible fighter.
Was devastating. Not only for Cormier, it was, oh my God, we saw it in him, right?
Well, look at round one. Didn't Cormier win round one?
Yeah.
He looked great in round one.
The fight
and we
was
all
looking,
thought he looked great.
He looked great.
It was looking good.
We were here, bunch of people, and John Jones fans online or whatever. Man, it was rough. It was hard to take in.
So if you didn't see the fight is back and forth. It's tense the entire time. And then third round? Second or third round?
Third, yeah.
Third round.
I think the idea was it was 1-1.
Yeah, it was 1-1 going into
nowhere.
third. And in the third, it was anybody's ball game. And then out of nowhere, he drops him with a head kick, finishes him. Cormier had never been finished in his entire career.
It wasn't just a finish, too. He was out for... Like,
it was bad.
And remember,
it
this
was
is a
bad.
guy that's taken punches to the face from Rumble Johnson and gone flying across the cage and gotten
kicks
back
from
up.
Anderson.
Gotten back up.
So he finishes him. Rogan interviews him afterwards, and I mean, he's obviously crushed. Tears are pouring from his face as he's answering questions, but he stays. Jones is celebrating as he should, and fans in attendance and at home are laughing and mocking the broken fighter. He's crying, they're mocking him, but Cormier is going to get the last laugh because days after the dust settles here, just like in the first fight, it's announced that John Jones has failed another drug test. And so the fight is awarded a no contest, and Cormier retains his title, a title he still holds to this day. But it begs the question, just as it was with the first fight, is that the real belt? Is he the real champion? And ultimately, that's for you, the listener, to decide. But we hope after hearing part 2 of this episode, you'll be better equipped to, make a decision to answer that question. But before we move on, just really quickly, I want to get your guys' take. What are your takeaways from DC's story?
It's not so much of a takeaway for me. It's a takeaway for like the listeners and for the avid John Jones fans. After hearing that, to me, and this is just my opinion, I don't know what you guys feel, but after hearing that, if you continue to boo a man like DC when he comes out and he shows how a champion is supposed to be and he does everything he's supposed to do the right way, and you continue to boo him, that's a serious problem in your thinking, in whatever process you do, like to make your favorite fighters. John Jones, hell of a fighter, and us three, we respect him in the cage. But if you don't respect DC outside of the cage, then man, you don't have the right mindset, to me.
I'm with you 100%. I don't necessarily have a takeaway because I think it's a very straightforward story. It's a man who's faced a ton of tragedy, and he perseveres, and he comes back. And look, right now he's the champion, and we're going to spend some time debating if he's the real champion or not. But if you are one of the people, if you're listening to this, and you're one of the people that boos Daniel Cormier, I want to know why. Because I believe if you're complaining about a situation, I always say this, scoring's broken. Weight cuts are broken. You always have to offer an alternative, okay? I believe you have to give a solution. If you don't like Daniel Cormier, I want to know why. Because I can tell you why I hate John Jones. I can give you a million reasons.
Yep.
What is wrong with Daniel Cormier? Why boo him? If you're just booing him because you like John Jones, say that. But don't shit on this man. Because people, they reach sometimes and they try to make excuses. He's a phenomenal guy. And he's dealt with a lot of tragedy, and he takes the high road every time. I want to know why. How can you hear a story like this and boo him? I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, email us, reach out to us on Twitter, whatever. Let us know why, because I am curious as well.
I don't get it.
All right, well, there you have it. The story of one of MMA's greatest fighters, Daniel Cormier. But as we said, there's more to Cormier's stories than just his trials, tribulations, and achievements. For instance, what makes a guy who's undersized and seemingly not in the best shape such a great fighter? Will Cormier ever recover from his losses to Jon Jones? How will the sport and its fans remember Cormier when he's gone? And does it pay in a sport like MMA to be the good guy? So in part 2 of our episode, we'll attempt to answer these questions and more. This is the untold story of Daniel D.C. Cormier. And at this point in time, it's hard to bring up Cormier's name without bringing up Jon Jones. So he's going to be forever linked with Jones, the way Magic's linked with Bird. They're in the same conversation. Peyton Manning and Brady, Ronaldo, Messi. There's a million of examples of people that are kind of linked together in their career. And when they both retire, they'll always be talked about in the same breath. So it's for this reason we need to begin with the question, will Cormier ever recover from his losses to Jones? And more specifically, can he separate from this eternal link to Jones?
I do not think he can. I saw, as we're releasing this is leading up to the Stipe fight being billed as a super fight. And there's people saying that if he can beat Stipe, he's the greatest of all time. And I immediately disagree. You cannot get away from the Jon Jones thing, PEDs or not. It's because you're always thinking, okay, if he beats Stipe, Jon Jones is going to come back and move up to heavyweight and beat him. Like, it's just looming in the background. It's something he has to deal with. And I just think you cannot get beaten handily by someone twice and have any type of claim to being the greatest of all time in a combat sport. It just doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. You know, in other sports, I'm sorry to cut you off, Zach, but in other sports like the NBA, if Michael Jordan retires for 2 years and the Houston Rockets win a title or whatever, those are considered legitimate titles. People don't say, well, the Rockets never would have won that title or whatever if Jordan was around. People think
Chicago fans say it.
They do, but those championships stand.
Yes.
They're a part of history. In MMA and in boxing, you go, he's not the real champion. That's the truth. People do not think he is the real light heavyweight champion of the world.
Individual sports, it's much more difficult because I was going to pose the question, you know, as a Ken Griffey Jr. fan growing up, with the hamstring injuries and those injuries that set him back, everyone at the time was saying he may break the home run record. He was doing it clean, blah, blah, blah. And then you're left to say, well, if Ken Griffey Jr. had stayed healthy, he could have been the greatest. Is that a scenario we get in here with Jon Jones? I mean, Jon Jones has been in and out of the cage. Even though he's beat DC, if DC continues to win and Jon Jones continues to screw up, do you still say Jon Jones is the greatest, or do you say Jon Jones could have been the greatest? At what point, even though you've had a loss to a person, at what point do you surpass them just by beating guys like Stipe or beating the next? Can it be done?
I don't know that you do. Look, the best thing he can do for that legacy and to try to make that argument is beat Stipe and defend. If he defends the heavyweight title, if he has some type of reign where he has them both in any way, that's like the Conor McGregor territory, except he'd actually be defending the belts.
Yes.
But the problem is Jon Jones is going to come back. Jones will be back within the next year.
Sure.
And if he keeps winning, it negates all arguments.
I agree that he'll never recover from the losses unless he beats him. He still has a hole to this day for the 2008 Olympics. Like, there's just not, it's there and it can't be filled because he can't go back. He does have a chance to go back and fill that hole against Jon Jones. He beat him once, no questions asked. However, on the other side of that, Tim, I think if he does beat Stipe with how he carries himself and what I perceive to be a champion, like, forget the gold belt. It's more for me like the morals and who he is as a person, and the ability to be at the top of the game or whatever he's at. I think to say the greatest of all time, the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, no. I think he will go down as it's hard because there's so many different ones, right? So I would say he's the greatest. He's the greatest something. It's a greatest UFC fighter. I don't know if it's
champion,
greatest champion of all
time. I'm trying.
I'm not here's why you can't say that. You can't say that because as great of a guy as he is, every time he gets to the grandest stage, he does not place number 1. He places like in 2004, he's like number 4 or 5 or something. He can't compete in 2008. And he smashes people. Look, I mean, he wins the Strikeforce heavyweight tournament, but what do people say? That wasn't the UFC. He's so fucking good at having that like asterisk next to his name.
1A.
He's 1A all the time. He's right there. And then when he gets to the grandest stage, when he gets to John Jones, he loses. So 2004 doesn't win. When he's supposed to win in 2008, can't compete. In the UFC, he loses Jones twice. I need to see him. Stipe's a good example of that, where you could say, oh, look, he gets his shot against Stipe after beating Volkan, and what if he loses to Stipe? They'll say it again. But if you beat Stipe, now we can start to say, okay, that was a super fight. And Stipe, there are people saying he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest heavyweight of all time. If you beat Stipe, now you're a champion to me. Now you're doing shit other champions can't do. Now you take your 2 belts and you go, John Jones, come get me.
So is it just because it's individual? Is that what makes that? Because think of it this way. A lot of people, I think it's probably 50-50. LeBron James is the greatest player of all time, but every time he gets to the big stage, he fails.
But ultimately he's done it twice, or was it 3 times? 3 times he's won. He's
Three.
won 3
He's won
times,
it.
including Cleveland, coming back against the greatest team of all time, 73-9. He did it, and that ended all arguments. Because what happens now when they lose to the Warriors? There's literally tweets: LeBron's the greatest of all time, but the Warriors the best team of all time. That's what people say. There's actually a case to defend LeBron now, and it took the win in Cleveland to do that. Because before, Taylor and I could argue for days on end about LeBron. We don't argue anymore about LeBron because it's kind of everyone kind of has an understanding of what's going on. I think combat sports are just different, though, because these other sports, baseball, you got 9 people on the diamond at a time.
It's hard to parallel. It's hard to
You
compare
can't-
to other sports.
You don't look back on Griffey and wonder what the Mariners could have done or the
It
Reds.
has nothing to do with the Mariners. Yep.
For me, with Cormier, it's just I need him to do it. This is the biggest event of the year coming up against what Penny are saying is the GOAT. I need him to do it there, and then we can start to talk about it.
Okay, so let's table the greatest of all time discussion, and let's talk about this. How does this guy keep going forward with all that's happened in his past? The stuff with Jones, getting to the big stage and losing, moving weight classes is down, then back up now, injuries, the undersized thing, and he still seems to be larger than life, at least to us, maybe not to the average fan. And I don't use that phrase in a cheesy way. He's doing things that no one else has been able to do. And if he beats Stipe, there you go. There's another thing that no one else is doing right now, and things that not even John Jones has been able to do. And I want to talk about this. While winning all of these fights, except the 2 against John Jones, he's leading a kids wrestling program at AKA. He's broadcasting, on UFC tonight on the main broadcast. He's taking short notice fights and trying to save cards. And he all of this while being an intense family man.
And I just want to throw something into your point right there. Remember, always the counter to him is the John Jones thing, that John Jones wouldn't take the chael fight on short notice.
Exactly.
And UFC 151 got canceled.
First event.
They
right?
literally are polar opposites of each other at everywhere you look. It's
Jones
crazy.
is riding around with women in his car, not his wife, doing things that he probably shouldn't be doing, partying with these women. Cormier's on MMA Hour, was it after the Anderson fight or the Gustafsson fight, telling Ariel, hey man, look, all these people cheering for me on Saturday night, they're not there Sunday morning when I wake up, walk downstairs, and my kid sees my face and it's bruised up and cut up and I look like a monster and the house is quiet. There's nobody there cheering anymore or booing anymore or doing anything. I'm there by myself, just a dad.
Yeah, he's a family man through and through.
So this is what I mean when I talk in the beginning about what makes a champion. I think that, look, the belt matters. You have to win a belt to be a champion. But I think what makes a champion is more than just winning a belt. I think it's how you handle things. I think that LeBron James, we'll use him again as an example. LeBron does a lot of good and handles himself really, really well. Michael Jordan may be the greatest basketball player of all time. Maybe. You can argue. I'll tell you what you can't argue. LeBron is a much nicer, kinder, upstanding individual He just
It's not
really
even close.
is. It's not even
close.
close. And what you do outside of the sport matters. Cormier is advancing the sport, trying to help it by broadcasting, trying to save cards, trying to teach young kids, trying to be a role model. That stuff takes effort. We hear about like Conor, like the media stuff. And granted, Cormier's media stuff is not on any level near Conor's. But they talk about how taxing that is as a fighter. And when you've got to finish training, go do a recording for a broadcast, go back to training, go do media coverage, go home, spend time with your kids, it takes a lot out of you, and he's able to do that.
I think Daniel Cormier is a great advocate for the sport. He's a great representative of the sport. He's someone that you want as the face of the sport. But he's not necessarily that true champion, because the true champions like the Andersons and the GSPs always found a way. That, to me, when I think of the word champion, is who that is there's a million stories with GSP about this fight, this happened, and this fight he was feeling this way, and this guy was cheating, and they always won. He doesn't necessarily always, he does it a lot of the time, but when he gets up against it, so to me, when you're looking for a word as to what he is, he might be the best possible advocate for the UFC, the best possible representation of our sport. But for me, there's still that tiny asterisk until he beats John Jones.
Okay, let's be clear. He is a champion. He won the belt.
For sure.
Is he the best fighter of all time? Probably not. No.
But Taylor, gun to your head, bet the house. Right now, who's the best fighter at 205 pounds?
Yeah, I would
say. I don't want the bullshit like, well, he's not active, he's suspended.
No. I would say John Jones. Absolutely. But
that's a problem.
Again, we're talking 1 and 1A. I'm not arguing Daniel's the best fighter of all time. What I'm arguing is that he is the embodiment of what a champion is. I think that to be the best of the best, to be the Michael Jordan, to be the John Jones, Floyd Mayweather, you name it, it does take a little bit of selfishness and a certain amount of focus on yourself and your career, and doing things like moving down to light heavyweight so that Kane can continue to fight at heavyweight, and taking on the broadcasting role and spending time with your family when you could be training or doing whatever. Those are going to take away from you. That's not taking anything away from John Jones and saying if Cormier was more focused and selfish, he would beat John Jones. I'm just saying, for me, there's more to being a champion than just being the best at your sport. There's other things that embody the word champion when I think of it. So when I made that introduction, it wasn't to say Daniel Cormier is better than John Jones. It's to say that when you hear the word champion, what comes to mind? Is it the best at the sport?
I'll tell you
or
what it's
is
not.
It all of this
it's
stuff?
not somebody holding onto a towel to make weight for a title fight. I mean, seriously, when we talk a lot about professionals making weight. Daniel Cormier did not make weight against Rumble.
So then who is the champion of 205?
No, he is. I'm just saying what Taylor's getting at. I follow your logic. You're about to say a classy individual who does everything right. And my rebuttal, and you're right, Daniel Cormier, I love him. He's an amazing fighter. I'm super excited to see his fight. But I was stunned. He did not make weight against
Rumble. So that's
Rumble.
his one foible.
And to anybody that doesn't remember Towelgate, he misses weight. He gets an hour. What does he miss it by, like 3 or 4? He misses it by a few pounds. It's 3.
No,
but
I don't think it was that much.
It was like half a pound.
Or it was a pound or two. But all I know is, doesn't he come back out like 3 minutes later and he holds up on the towel and makes weight?
It's an old wrestling trick.
It's an old wrestling trick where he puts his hands on top of the towel.
Look, it's a little bit. Yeah,
that is not what
underhanded.
If John
it's
Jones
not great.
did that, we'd lose our mind.
Of course,
so we have
but
to be
again,
honest.
there's a reputation there. That's Daniel Cormier's one foible, if you can find it. That's it.
His weight
Jones
cuts?
is poking people in the eye in the ring. He's hitting pregnant women. He's DUI.
So that's my question.
I mean, there's all kinds of things.
So we don't have a champion at 205.
It's weird. We do. It's Daniel Cormier.
It's Daniel Cormier.
But
I
in the
get
sense
you.
of a belt.
It's weird. That's why I said in the beginning, this is a complicated episode.
It is
it's
a
very complicated
episode.
situation because
It
there's
is.
a rebuttal to every side.
I think of it as like, I can't believe I'm saying this. I think Mike Tyson said it best about Floyd Mayweather. Is Floyd said he was the best of all time. Mike Tyson simply said he can't walk down the street by himself. Muhammad Ali can. That makes a champion. So I think who's the greatest of all time kind of being
it's
that.
not necessarily
being a great
record.
champion.
It's not.
Doesn't,
yes.
Right.
It everything is in play here, and if we have to be honest, because if John Jones or anybody else, like, we're maybe not the best fan against, touch that towel, we're
my
like,
God.
get him the fuck out of here.
Well, that's the thing, man, is like, that's the thing. I love Cormier and I hate John Jones, but we've always said on this podcast we're going to be honest and fair.
Absolutely.
And that's what I want to do today. I don't want this to be here waving, like, no pun intended, but like waving the Cormier towel. Like, I'm not here to just like be his fan. I want to tell it like it is. And in my head, I don't think of him as the true champion.
Sure.
It makes sense to me. It's not an interim belt, but there are things that could have been done differently. Like when George St. Pierre retired, he did a great job of relinquishing his title and saying, I'm out. And they were able to crown a new champion. And it felt like when Robbie and Johnny Hendricks had that feud, like they were the real champions. But the whole time we were still in the back of your head, like, wonder what would happen if they fought GSP.
Yeah.
You just wanted to know.
Of course.
And that was what it was all building up to, is like, what if Hendricks fought GSP again or whatever. This one's been a bit of a mess because it was first his interim, then they strip him, but still the same result is you're still going. What's going to happen when they fight? What are we going to be wondering? Is if he wins the heavyweight title, if he beats Stipe, we're going to go, is Jones going to come back and fight him?
That loss, or those two losses, depending on the second one was overturned to a no contest, but that loss to John Jones will stay with Cormier forever. He has to beat John Jones. There's no question about it to alter the narrative. How you remember him when he retires, if he doesn't beat John Jones, that's up to you. But again, I hope that the takeaway from this episode for our listeners, since I didn't get to answer this question earlier, I hope the takeaway is that whether you love John Jones or not is completely irrelevant here. I just hope you find a new respect for Daniel Cormier. You don't have to cheer for him, but you also don't have to boo him.
Yep.
Because he really is, if you love MMA, you should be cheering for him. Because he is trying to do MMA justice. He's trying to be a good representation of what this sport is. This sport's barbaric enough. People on the outside looking in think that the fans are a bunch of meatheads, that it's just a bunch of, blood and guts inside the cage. We don't need our champions doing cocaine and partying with hookers and hitting pregnant women. That's not what we need to advance the sport. Cormier is advancing the sport. It's what we're trying to do on this podcast. And I want to read a quote from a website, Life of Dad. They did an interview with Cormier a while back, and they asked him, what were some of the core values you look to instill in your children? And Cormier said, hard work, honesty, discipline, and just having values. Value yourself, value the people around you. Just be nice, kind, and genuine. Let people see you for who you are. Don't put up a facade. Don't have a wall up. Just be you. Some people will accept you. Some people won't. But have values. Value yourself. And that just couldn't be more poignant with the John Jones things, because one of the knock on John Jones is that he puts up this fake nice guy facade, and underneath he's not that person. Daniel Cormier is saying, you need to be real, be transparent, cry in the octagon if you need to cry. Like, just be yourself, be true to who you are.
Two times I hate John Jones, and 2 times I've felt I didn't ever root for him, but I was happy for him when he came back and he was fighting OSP and they played Coming Home and he was so happy to be in the cage. For a minute, I was happy for him. But like you said, Cormier was announcing, and by the end of it, he's like giving Cormier the bird and he's being classless. And I'm like, all right, fuck this guy. Second time, after he beats Cormier in the second fight, he gives that amazing post-fight speech. Awesome. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I thought he was a changed man. He actually was classy to Daniel Cormier. Sure as shit, he pops for PEDs again. John Jones lets people down all the time. Daniel Cormier, give him a chance because he won't let you down, okay? Does he struggle with weight cuts at times? Yes. Does he struggle sometimes in the big moments? But he will never let you down as far as a role model is concerned, a face of a struggling sport is concerned. He's always going to come through, and he's going to bring the fight. The fight with Stipe is going to be awesome one way or the other, and I'm looking forward to it.
Got anything left, Zach? All right, we'll wrap it up there. That concludes our episode. If you like what you heard, be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and for bonus content, check us out on Patreon. And please help us out by sharing this episode with friends. More than we want our podcast to grow, we want the sport to grow. And that's why we do what we do. Because two men fighting inside a steel cage isn't for everyone, but stories like Daniel Cormier's are. This is MMA Untold. And if you don't know, now you know.
She told me don't worry about your size. So she kept feeding me Popeye's chicken, those legs and thighs. You know I won't be no stick figure lightweight, you know that's wrong. So just slide me that funfetti icing and move along. Because you know I'm all about that cake and chicken. I'm all about that cake and chicken. I'm all about that cake and chicken. I'm all about that cake.
John Jones, get your together, I'm waiting for you.